Washington Journal continues.
Our first guest of the morning is Myron Ebell with Competitive Enterprise Institute. He serves as the director for the Center for Energy and the Environment, here to talk about the recent decision by the White House on the Paris Climate Agreement. Good morning.
Good morning, Pedro.
A little bit about your organization first. How would you describe yourselves to others and what you do?
We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit public policy institute that works on issues from a free market perspective, and we concentrate on regulations. We accept no government funding, and our annual budget is getting close to $8 million a year.
Who funds that budget?
Several thousand individuals, charitable foundations, and a few corporations.
Yeah, so is any of those corporations or individuals tied to the energy industry at all?
We have a policy not to disclose who our donors are. If our donors want to disclose that they're contributing to us, then that's fine.
But in the markets that you do receive money from, if not from the energy, what other areas, in a broad sense, do you receive money from?
A very broad spectrum of individuals across the country and, in fact, around the world.
What was your organization's positioning on the Paris Climate Agreement and the president's decision to move out of it?
We have pushed since the Paris Agreement came over the horizon that it was a treaty. It was going to be a treaty from day one, but they were describing it as not a treaty, just an executive agreement. Our position has been that the president's acceptance of the treaty, sending a letter saying, I accept it, we're now a member, was invalid because every other country in the world went through its normal legal and constitutional procedures. Virtually every other country called it ratification. For example, Japan called it acceptance, but then they accepted the Kyoto Protocol and they accepted the underlying treaty, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So our view starting in 2015 is that the Senate needs to take this up and have a vote on it. And so what we've seen now is that what can be done by executive fiat by President Obama can be undone by executive fiat by President Trump. So I think, President Obama made a gamble that he could get away with this. It was likely that either a Democrat would be elected who would go along with it, or a Republican like George W. Bush who would say, well, if I just ignore it, it will go away. Unfortunately for President Obama's gamble, it failed for him, unfortunately, and President Trump has said, I'm going to undo this.
So you were profiled by CNN recently, and this is the headline they applied to you and your organization. They said the man behind the decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Is that true?
Well, no. President Trump made a number of campaign commitments during the campaign, and they're pretty clear. They're not based on long policy papers where you qualify everything and try to fudge the issue. He gave a number of policy speeches starting on May 26th of last year in Bismarck, North Dakota. And that was his energy and environment speech. And he said, I'm going to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement, and I'm going to get rid of President Obama's climate agenda, which has all been implemented by regulation and executive order and without Congress. So he promised that. So I think the key to the decision is that he's keeping his promises.
And the organization put out an ad showing those promises from the president himself, and this was shortly before the decision was made.
Yes, we did, and that ad was really meant to remind the people in the White House and the president how emphatic his promise was and how important it was.